Most people think they're bad at conversation. They're wrong. The real problem isn't that you have nothing to say. It's that you're trying to find something interesting to say. And the harder you search, the more unnatural the conversation becomes. Think about what happens at work. Someone says, "I'm exhausted. I barely slept last night." You say, "Why? What happened?"
My neighbor was making noise.
"Oh, that's annoying." And that's it. Two people have technically had a conversation, but somehow neither of them said anything. Now watch what happens if you do something different.
I'm exhausted. I barely slept last night. Wait, are we talking bad night's sleep tired, or I might fall asleep during this meeting tired?
They tell you it's the second one.
What was your neighbor doing? Playing music at 2 in the morning. Who voluntarily listens to music at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday?
Now they start telling you everything. What happened, what the neighbor was playing, why they finally went upstairs, and suddenly you're not searching for another topic. You're inside a story. That's the first thing most people miss. The next interesting thing is usually hiding inside the last thing they said. You don't need another topic. You need to notice the thread that's already there. Someone at a party says,
I've been trying to cook more lately.
most people go, "Oh, nice. What do you cook?" They answer, and now you're looking for the next question. Instead, trying to cook more, what happened? Did your bank account finally scare you? Now they tell you they've been spending too much on takeout. You ask, what's the one thing you can actually make without destroying the kitchen? They tell you. Then they tell you about the first time they tried making it. Then comes the disaster. And suddenly you're hearing a story that was hiding inside a sentence that sounded completely ordinary. That's the difference. You're not constantly changing subjects. You're pulling on the one you've already got. But here's where people take this too far. They hear, ask follow-up questions, and turn the conversation into an interrogation. What do you do? How long have you worked there? Do you like it? What do you do outside work? Now you're not talking to someone. You're collecting data. And that's not what makes a conversation interesting. The goal isn't to ask more questions. It's to become curious about the answer you just received. Because once you start doing that, something strange happens. You stop carrying the conversation by yourself. But what happens when the answer you're given isn't interesting at all? That's where things get more interesting. There's a simple rule from improv that gives you something to do with almost any answer. Yes, and imagine your coworker says, "I think I should quit my job and open a bakery." You could say, "That's probably a terrible idea." Maybe it is, but you've just killed the conversation. Instead, "Okay, and what are we calling this bakery?" Now you've given the idea somewhere to go. They come up with a name. You build on it. They tell you what they'd sell. You ask what happens when the bakery becomes wildly successful. Suddenly you're not exchanging information. You're building a little world together. And that's what yes and really means. Not agreeing with everything. Not pretending every idea is brilliant. Just refusing to slam the door shut. Instead of thinking, what is the correct thing to say? You start thinking, what can I do with that? Someone at work says, "This project is going to take forever." You could say, "Yeah, I know." Or, "So when are we finishing this? Christmas?" They tell you the actual deadline. You ask what's making it take so long. They explain. And now a boring complaint has turned into a conversation about what's actually happening. But there's another level to this. You can follow what someone says. You can build on it. But if you really want people to stay engaged, you need to give them a reason to want the next sentence. And there's a simple way to do that. Don't always give people the beginning of the story. Sometimes give them the part that makes them need the beginning. Imagine you tell your friend, "I nearly got fired this morning." Then stop. They're going to ask, what happened? Now they're invested. Maybe you accidentally sent the wrong file. Maybe it went to the wrong person. Maybe your boss called you into the office. The story doesn't even have to be extraordinary. You just created a gap, and their brain wants to close it. You can do the same thing when someone is telling you a story. They say, "I had the weirdest thing happen yesterday." Don't immediately change the subject. Ask, what happened? They start explaining. You hear something strange. Wait, why were you there? They explain. And then what happened? Another detail appears. Now you're not interviewing them. You're helping them uncover their own story. And notice what's happening. You haven't needed a clever conversation starter once. You've just kept opening doors. But there's still one problem. Sometimes you understand all of this, and your mind still goes completely blank. You don't know what to say. You don't know what question to ask. You start thinking about the silence. And the second you start thinking about the silence, the conversation becomes even harder. So here's a little exercise that fixes that. For the next few minutes, try answering everything with a question. Someone says, "I had the worst day at work." "What happened?" They explain. "Who caused the problem?" They tell you. "What did you do?" They answer. "And what happened after that?" Notice what you stopped doing. You're no longer trying to manufacture your next sentence. You're listening for it. The other person is giving you the material. You're just picking it up. And that's the real secret behind all of this. You don't need an endless supply of stories. You don't need 10 clever questions memorized. You don't need to become the funniest person in the room. You need to know what to do with whatever is already happening. Someone says, "My sister just got engaged." Don't automatically say, "Oh, congratulations." Ask, "How did he propose?" Now you have a story, they tell you. You notice something unexpected. You ask about it. Maybe you share something of your own. Maybe you tease them. Maybe another detail catches your attention. And suddenly the conversation has a life of its own. That's the system. Follow it. Take the thread they just gave you. Play with it. Don't shut down every idea that comes your way. Open it. If there's a story underneath the answer, pull it out. Because the best conversationalists aren't necessarily the people with the most interesting lives. They're the people who can find something interesting in an ordinary moment. So the next time your brain says, "I have nothing to say," don't search for a new topic. Don't panic. Don't start mentally scrolling through conversation starters. Look at the last thing they said, because there's probably another conversation hiding inside it. Pull that thread, then pull the next one, and see where it takes you.